If I know that I can't remove myself from the situation just prior to that point of no return, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire off one of those tools. Now in this instance, what I might do is, as shown in his range, I'm going to put in my headbutt, maybe, and put into an elbow.
Violence destroys. Weaponizing is the counter strategies to violent criminal assault. Hey, I'm Greg LaBeouf, aka The Violence Guy, and I'm sharing with you how I went from the victim of a brutal attempted murder to mastering the tool of violence and protecting myself and family, and how you can do the same from the safety and comfort of your own home. Welcome to Weaponizing DIY.
We're always faced with two options. The first thing is to remove ourselves from the situation, and the second thing is, if that's not possible, remove the situation. So once this person enters our trapping range, okay, remember our primary tools are headbutts, knees, elbows, and tie-up, thumb and eyes under pressure. So when this person gets into this range, as opposed to me shoving this person back and now both of us put our hands up, and now I have to deal with potentially a bigger, stronger person who can out-punch and out-kick me, what has to happen is when we're in this range, I want you to remember one concept. And that concept simply is, the firstest with the mostest is the bestest. So what happens is when we enter this range, if I know that I can't remove myself from the situation just prior to that point of no return, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire off one of those tools. Now in this instance, what I might do is, as shown in his range, I'm going to put in my headbutt, maybe, and put into an elbow. What's going to happen is once I put the person on the floor, then I'm going to head out the door. So we're not going to stick around and admire our handiwork, we're not going to pose. If I stand and he approaches me from the side angle, what we might have here is an unassisted headbutt. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm being economical with my body mechanics. I don't have to turn, grab the head, and then headbutt. All I simply do is lash in with the side of the head, the unassisted headbutt. If I happen to be squared up to the person, so this might be an instant where I'm going to walk by him and maybe something's already happened in the bar earlier, he blocks my way, whatever, it doesn't matter what he says, it's irrelevant. But I know right off the bat it's a feeling. And what happens is I know that this is going to become a situation, so I do my preliminary analysis and I first say, can I remove myself from the situation? If the answer is no, what I'm going to do is, boom, I'm going to put in the headbutt. If he's square to me, bam, maybe I will assist it. Maybe it's a thumb in the eyes. Maybe all I need to do is fire in a quick, boom, fire in a quick knee. When he drops, again, I'm out the door. Okay, so the first concept that we're going to run through is the firstest with the mostest is the bestest. Most street assaults is you're not going to be faced with just one attacker. You're more than likely to be faced with multiple opponents. So what we're going to do next is we're going to switch it, and now we're going to have two attackers. And what we're going to do with two attackers is the concept stays somewhat similar, but the key thing for us is that we need to make our escape. So the first concept always applies. The firstest with the mostest is the bestest. The second concept we're going to put into that is that the blast separates. Let's see, I'll get Brad here, and I'm just going to have Dustin jump up. And what happens now, and again, this can come from different angles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do from the hardest angle. Now in our multiple opponent scenarios in rapid assault tactics, we know that it is impossible to fight two people at one time. So if I stay triangled and I stay in the middle of all this, what's going to happen is if I engage Brad and I start to push Brad or argue with Brad, if he throws that punch, even if I successfully defend that punch, Dustin is at this point in time going to jump into the assault. So what's going to end up happening is, throw punches, guys, is I'm going to end up in the middle and getting beat, basically. Okay? So what we want to do is the firstest with the mostest is the bestest, and the blast separates. So in a situation like this, which is potentially the worst case scenario, the first thing I'm going to do is assess the situation. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to start to push with the person. I'm simply going to move into our game plan. Okay? So the first thing I would do is assess the situation, and because Brad's slightly closer to me, and because I happen to be facing forward so I can try to use my peripheral vision to pick up each opponent, the first tool is probably going to come out is going to be the unassisted headbutt. The second that I hit the unassisted headbutt and Brad's body is recoiling, I'm going to turn and I'm going to implement the straight blast. Now the straight blast is going to separate my two opponents, and if at all possible, I'm going to make my exit at that time. If it requires, I can blast Dustin, separate the two, turn, and re-engage on Brad. So hopefully the first tool that I throw does enough damage to take the number one assailant out of commission. So what it's going to look like is, and remember, you cannot wait for them to start the fight. If you wait for them to start the fight, now you've made things much harder for yourself. So as the situation arises and the two individuals start coming, especially even if they're bumping and they're in tight to me, what's going to happen is, boom, unassisted headbutt, and I'm going to spin, and I'm going to kick into a straight blast. Okay, so the firstest with the mostest is the bestest. The blast separates. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make things harder. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in 3 assailants. And what I want you to do with this is you have to remember that our concepts do not change, and that's one of the most important things for everybody to grasp. we'll have a connecting thread throughout all of our scenarios. Now what we're going to do is if I have Lindsay, I have Brad, and I have Paul. And now again, we have no idea exactly how the formation is going to happen. I might have all 3 individuals facing me. I might have 2 facing me, 1 behind me. Okay? We're going to start off just with this simple concept. And I want you to be very aware of one thing. Now, the firstest with the closest is the bestest. So what I need to do in this position is I need to take out the person who's closest to me. In this case, it happens to be Lucky Brad. Okay? So what Brad's going to do is Brad's going to get hit. Now, you have to remember one thing. If I simply turn and hit Brad with a knee, that might not do the damage I'm looking for. Okay? So what I need to do is the first and the most, the bestest is trying to apply the most brutally efficient tool at that moment. So what I'm going to do, more than likely again, is you're seeing a connecting thread. It's more than likely going to be the headbutt, or it's going to be taking the tip of the elbow, boom, and raking him with that. And when you hit the elbow and he rocks backwards, the blast is now going to separate. But here's the most important concept. As I kick into the straight blast and I'm going by Paul, when I blast Lindsay, normally in our game plan, and if you watch the Rapid Assault Tactic tapes, and for all those guys here that have been part of the RAT, is when you blast, we like to flow to headbutts, knees, and elbows. The key thing is when there's 3 people, I can't. What I have to do is blast into Lindsay or the second fighter, disengage, and turn to the third fighter. What I'm trying to do is capture an essence of surprise on all 3 individuals. It is so imperative that you intercept instantaneously. The second this develops, you catch the fighters or you catch the attackers flat-footed. So if I hit 1 bam or boom, I hit the elbow, I blast into Lindsay, the second Paul turns, boom, I'm right back into firing my biggest tool into Paul. Maybe it's a headbutt. In that scenario, I turned and hit Paul with the headbutt because as I disengaged from the blast and spun, Paul was already into the punch. It was the most economical tool. Had Paul been stunned momentarily, and as I disengaged from Lindsay and spun and there was distance, I would have re-engaged into my blast. The blast bridges the gap. Okay, so the firstest with the mostest is the bestest. The blast separates, disengage, and whatever is appropriate based on the range, assault the third person, make for the exit.